Clibanarius cubensis, Saussure, 1858, family Diogenidae. This medium to large hermit crab is moderately common on Curaçao. It is much larger than Clibanarius tricolor, specimens 10 to 15 millimeters in cephalothorax length being not at all uncommon. The organism is rather drab in appearance. Olive green stripes on a brownish background characterize the long ambulatory legs. Both in the laboratory and in the field, this crab showed both similarities and differences when compared with the above-mentioned species of the genus. The ambulatory legs of the cubensis appear proportionally longer, and they are held away from the body at a greater angle than those of tricolor. Clibanarius cubensis was found only on the shallow mudflats inside some protected bays. Small but consistent numbers were found along portions of Piscadera Inner Bay, Spance Water, Bracaput, and Bartool Bay. In Piscadera Bay, and at Bracaput, the crabs could be located only during high tide, either day or night. As the incoming tide covered the mudflats, the crabs moved up onto them from slightly deeper waters, where they had been concealed by the turbidity of the water. No data were gathered concerning population density or behavior of these crabs in the deeper, turbid waters of these bays. In general, Clibanarius cubensis is a rather slowly moving hermit. During walking, this slow nature is exaggerated by the length of the ambulatories and a pronounced upward movement preceding the forward motion of the leg, which is necessitated by the curvature of the dactyl and the overall angle of the leg relative to the body. The crab's habit of living and moving about on soft mud may have helped to make the upward element of the walking motion necessary. The aggressive behavior repertoire of Clibanarius cubensis is similar to the other members of the Diogenidae. The single ambulatory raise is the aggressive display most frequently given by a member of an interacting pair. The upward motion is not as rapid as in C. tricolor, taking up to a full second to execute. In addition, the limb is not straight and rigid during movement, but rather the proximal segments attain the raised position before the distal ones. When fully raised, the dactyl is slightly higher than the other segments of the leg, which are parallel to the substratum. The dactyl is moved through 35 to 55 degrees, depending on the starting position of the limb. Frequently, in severe aggressive interactions, an individual will execute a short series of ambulatory raises without returning the limb to the substratum. The limb is moved up and down through about 30 degrees without a complete downward motion to the neutral position. This waving was seen occasionally but less frequently in tricolor. In cubensis, the ambulatory raise often but not always had a distinct forward element. In some instances, the limb was moved forward 20 to 30 degrees as it was raised and back as it was lowered. The overall motion formed an oval. Not infrequently, the other crab was lightly struck in the eye region at the top of the downward motion. The chelipeds of Clibanarius cubensis are used more frequently in aggressive interactions than those of C. tricolor. Moreover, two distinct behavior patterns are observable in cubensis. The small size of tricolor would make the detection and recognition of two behavior patterns difficult. The cheliped extension is somewhat similar to that of tricolor. One or both chelipeds, slightly opened, are moved upward through about 70 degrees to a position approximately 20 degrees below the horizontal. The motion is rather slow and variable. Tests described in a later section have shown that the chelipeds in the extended position are aggressive stimuli. The second behavior pattern involving the chelipeds which occurred in aggressive interactions was the cheliped presentation. This appears to be a less intense aggressive signal and often precedes a cheliped extension. It may involve one or both of the crab's equal chelipeds. A small forward motion brings the dactyl of the cheliped to a position perpendicular to the substratum. The whole body of the crab is raised slightly, and the proximal segments of the ambulatories moved outward. The proximal segments of the chelipeds are held at a 45-degree angle to the substratum. The movements involved are slight, but they make the individual appear larger and make the chelipeds more prominent. The chelipeds may be held in this position, dactyls perpendicular to the substratum, for some seconds before the animal either executes a cheliped extension or moves its chelipeds back to the normal position. Shell-fighting behavior follows the pattern for all Diogenid crabs. All movements are rather slow. The positioning movements of the aggressive crab approximately describe a V, the vertical portions of the behavior pattern being more prominent than the side-to-side portions. During the wrapping movements that follow positioning, the body shell of the aggressor is slightly lower with respect to the aperture of the defending crab than in Clibanarius tricolor. A complete cycle of the movements of a wrap took 1.2 seconds, range 0.72 to 2.10 seconds. The downward motion took 0.12 to 0.18 seconds and was more consistent than the movement bringing the shell back up to the fully raised position. The latter was variable, generally becoming slower as a series of wraps was carried out. In one series, the execution of the upward motion lasted 0.36, 0.48, 0.48, and 0.60 seconds for successive wraps of the series. Series consisted of fewer wraps than in tricolor. Series of over 10 to 15 wraps were rather rare. In the fully raised position, the shell of the aggressor was pulled back further than in most species. Up to half of the abdomen was exposed in the fully raised position. Despite many hours of observation, the complete sexual behavior of Clibanarius cubensis was not observed. In only 2 cases was definite sexual behavior seen. It is very unfortunate that I was unable to record more of the mating activity, since what was observed is distinctly different from that of the 2 members of the genus described above. In the first instance, 2 individuals were observed in an opposed position, but both were up and out. Their ambulatory legs intermingled and moving up and down among the limbs of the other. The female then grasped 2 ambulatories of the male with her chelipeds and ducked into her shell. After several minutes she came back out, and there followed a period of mutual pulling of the other's ambulatories with chelipeds. Shortly after this I had to cease observation a few minutes to complete an experiment in progress. When I returned, the pair had separated, and the female was sitting on top of the male shell, performing solitary wraps, a motion similar to the wrapping motion of the aggressor of a shell fight, but the crab is not interacting with any other. This behavior was seen occasionally in females of other species following copulation. The pair separated completely after about 30 minutes. Later examinations showed that the female had spermatophores attached several places on her ventral side, around the bases of the walking legs. In the second case, a large female had been releasing larvae for some minutes when a male grasped her and moved into the opposed position. The female ducked in, and during the subsequent hours of observation very little occurred. However, intermingling of all ambulatories and mutual pulling of ambulatories with chelipeds, while in an opposed position, did occur several times. The diel variation in activity of Clibanarius cubensis is shown in Figure 15. The locomotor activity pattern of variation was rather dissimilar on the 2 days measured, so each day's results are given rather than an average. It could be that the low level of feeding activity observed during these experiments was in part due to the sand rather than mud bottom in the observation tanks. Figure 15. DL variation in activities of Clibanarius cubensis. Feeding activity shows evening peak. Aggressive activity nocturnal. Locomotor activity variable. Results of both days presented.